The Apache girl was hunted, until a lone rancher stood between her and death. The desert was quiet in the early morning, but it was not a peaceful quiet. It was the kind that made every sound feel louder, every shadow feel closer. The young Apache girl moved carefully through the dry land, her breath short and uneven. Her feet were sore, her throat burned with thirst, and dust clung to her clothes and hair. Still, she did not stop. She could not stop. She had been running since before sunrise. Only hours earlier, her life had been simple in ways she had never questioned. She had lived with her aunt on a small piece of land far from towns and highways. The nights were dark and full of stars, and the days were filled with work, stories, and quiet moments. She knew the land well. She knew how to listen to the wind, how to read tracks in the dirt, how to find shade when the sun became cruel. She believed that knowing these things would always be enough. She was wrong. The trouble began when she saw something she was never meant to see. It happened near a back road that few people used, where dust hung in the air and old tire marks crossed each other like scars. She had gone there to collect firewood, keeping close to the bushes the way she always did. That was when voices reached her ears, angry voices. She hid without thinking, lowering herself behind rocks and brush. From her hiding place, she watched men argue near two parked vehicles. Their words were sharp and filled with fear. She did not understand everything they said, but she understood enough. Something bad had happened, something they wanted hidden. When one of them turned suddenly, she froze, her heart pounding so hard she was sure it would give her away. But they did not see her. She stayed hidden long after they left, even when the dust settled and the land seemed empty again. When she finally stood, her legs shook. She knew then that her life had changed. People like those men did not want witnesses. They did not want anyone who could speak. She ran home as fast as she could. Her aunt knew something was wrong the moment she saw her face. The girl tried to explain, her words rushing out in broken pieces. Her aunt listened without interrupting, her expression growing darker with every sentence. When the girl finished, the older woman did not hesitate. She packed food, water, and a small bag. Her hands moved quickly, but her eyes were full of worry. "They will come," her aunt said quietly, "and they will not ask questions." Before the sun reached its highest point, the girl was sent away. It was not a goodbye filled with long words or comfort. There was no time for that. Her aunt held her face, pressed her forehead to hers, and told her to run toward the open land, away from roads and towns. "Trust the land," she said. "It knows you." The girl ran. Now, hours later, the land felt different. The heat pressed down on her shoulders. Her legs ached, and every step sent pain through her feet. She drank small sips from her bottle, knowing she had to make it last. She moved from shade to shade, hiding when she heard distant engines, freezing when birds suddenly took flight. Fear followed her like a shadow. She did not know how far she had gone. The desert did not offer signs or comfort. Everything looked the same after a while. Her thoughts turned dark as the day stretched on. She wondered if the men were already looking for her. She wondered if they had been to her home. She wondered if her aunt was safe. She pushed those thoughts away. Fear could slow her down, and slowing down could cost her everything. By late afternoon, her strength began to fail. The sun felt heavier, as if it were pulling her toward the ground. Her vision blurred at the edges. She stumbled more than once, catching herself just before falling. When she reached a long stretch of open land with no shade, her heart sank. Crossing it would leave her exposed, but turning back was not an option. She stepped forward anyway. Halfway across, she heard it. The distant sound of engines. Her body reacted before her mind did. She dropped low and crawled toward a shallow dip in the ground. She pressed herself into the dirt, barely breathing. The sound grew louder, then faded. She stayed still long after it was gone, tears sliding silently down her face. When she finally stood, her legs shook so badly she nearly fell. She walked until the sun began to lower, turning the sky orange and red. That was when she saw it, a fence stretching across the land, old wooden posts connected by wire. Beyond it, the land looked different, managed, used, a ranch. Hope and fear rose together in her chest. A ranch meant people, shelter, water, but it also meant questions. And questions could lead her back to danger. She followed the fence line, moving slowly now. Her energy was almost gone. Each step felt heavier than the last. Her mouth was dry, her head light. When her foot caught on a rock and she fell, she did not get up right away. She lay there, staring at the sky as the first stars appeared. For a moment she thought this was how it would end. Alone, unseen, just another story the desert would keep to itself. Her chest tightened, not with fear now, but with sadness. She thought of her aunt, of the nights filled with stories, of a life that had felt safe only yesterday. She tried to stand again, but her body refused. That was when she heard footsteps. At first, she thought she was imagining it. Then she heard them again, steady and slow, coming from the other side of the fence. Panic rushed through her. She tried to crawl, to hide, but her strength was gone. A shadow fell across her. She looked up, her vision swimming, and saw the outline of a man standing a short distance away. He wore a wide hat and boots covered in dust. He did not move closer right away. He simply stood there as if measuring the moment. The girl's heart pounded. She expected anger or suspicion or a shout. Instead, the man spoke calmly. "Easy," he said. "I'm not here to hurt you." His voice was low, steady, like someone used to quiet places. He took a step closer, slow enough not to scare her. He noticed her condition at once. The cracked lips, the dirt-streaked face, the way her hands trembled. "You're hurt," he said, more like a statement than a question. She tried to answer, but no words came out. The man crouched down a few steps away and placed a water bottle on the ground between them. He slid it gently toward her and leaned back, giving her space. "Drink," he said, slowly. Her hands shook as she reached for the bottle. She drank carefully, just as he said, each swallow feeling like life returning to her body. Tears filled her eyes again, this time from relief. The man watched quietly, his face serious. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the desert cooled. Somewhere far away, an engine started, then stopped. The sound carried on the wind. The man's eyes lifted toward the distance, sharp and thoughtful. Whatever had driven this girl into the desert, whatever fear had pushed her to collapse at his fence, he knew one thing for certain. Trouble had found his land. The man did not rush her. He stayed where he was, letting the quiet return to the land. The girl drank the water slowly, just as he had told her. Each swallow helped her think more clearly, but her body was still weak. When she finished, she held the bottle in both hands as if it were something precious. The man stood and offered his hand, not too close, not too far. "Can you stand?" he asked. She nodded, though she was not sure. With his steady support, she rose to her feet. The ground felt unsteady, and she leaned against the fence for balance. The man did not touch her again once she was standing. He respected the space between them. "My name is Daniel," he said after a moment. "This is my ranch." She hesitated, then told him her name softly. Saying it out loud made everything feel more real. Daniel nodded, as if he understood how hard that small act was. "You're safe here for now," he said. "Let's get you out of the open." He opened the gate and led her along a narrow path toward the ranch house. The building was simple, built low against the land with a wide porch and worn steps. A single light glowed near the door. It was not bright, but it felt welcoming after the long day. Inside, the house smelled of wood, coffee, and dust. Daniel guided her to a chair at the small kitchen table. He poured her another glass of water and brought a bowl of soup, still warm. He placed it in front of her and stepped back. "Eat if you can," he said. "No rush." She ate slowly, her hands steadying with each bite. The warmth spread through her, easing the tight knot in her chest. For the first time since morning, she felt like she might survive the night. Daniel sat across from her but did not ask questions right away. He watched her carefully, noticing how she flinched at sudden sounds and how her eyes moved often toward the windows. After a while, he spoke. "Someone looking for you?" She froze, the spoon stopping halfway to her mouth. "You don't have to answer," he added quickly. "I just need to know how careful we should be." She lowered the spoon and took a breath. The words came slowly, not in full detail, but enough. She told him she had seen something she should not have. She told him men were searching for her. She did not name them or explain everything. She did not need to. Daniel leaned back in his chair, his face thoughtful. He had lived on this land long enough to know when danger followed someone home. "You did right coming here," he said, "but understand this. If they're looking, they won't stop easy." She nodded. She already knew that. Night fell fully outside. The desert cooled and the wind brushed against the house. Daniel walked through the rooms, checking doors and windows. He moved with calm purpose, not fear. When he returned, he handed her a blanket. "You can rest on the couch," he said. "I'll stay up a while." She wanted to thank him, but the words stuck in her throat. Instead, she wrapped the blanket around herself and lay down. The couch was worn but comfortable. Her eyes closed before she realized it. Sleep did not come gently. Her dreams were filled with running feet and loud engines. More than once she woke with a sharp breath, her heart racing. Each time she saw Daniel sitting at the table, a lamp on, a cup of coffee in his hand. He did not stare, he did not question, he was simply there. Near dawn she slept more deeply. When she woke, sunlight filled the room. For a brief moment she forgot where she was. Then the memory returned, heavy and sharp. She sat up quickly. Daniel was already awake, standing near the window. "Morning," he said. "You hungry?" She nodded. He made simple food, eggs, bread, fruit. They ate in quiet. Outside, the land looked calm, almost kind. It was hard to believe danger could exist in such a place. After breakfast, Daniel asked her to stay inside while he checked the property. She watched from the window as he walked the fence line, scanning the ground. When he returned, his expression had changed. "Tracks," he said. "Fresh." Her chest tightened. "Not on my land yet," he added, "but close enough." She stood, fear rushing back. "I can leave," she said quickly. "I don't want trouble for you." Daniel shook his head. "Running won't make this better, it'll make it worse." He thought for a moment. "I need to know more," he said gently. "Not details, just the truth. Are they dangerous?" She met his eyes. "Yes." That was enough. Daniel picked up his phone and made a call. He spoke quietly, using few words. When he hung up, he looked at her. "I've asked someone I trust to be ready," he said, "just in case." The hours passed slowly. Every sound made her tense. Around midday, dust rose in the distance. A vehicle approached and stopped near the gate. Two men stepped out. They wore neat clothes and confident smiles. Daniel stepped outside before they reached the house. She watched through the window, her hands clenched. The men spoke to him, gesturing casually. Daniel listened, his body relaxed, his voice calm. She could not hear the words, but she could feel the tension. One of the men looked toward the house. Daniel shifted slightly, blocking the view. After a few minutes, the men left. The dust settled again. Daniel came back inside, his face serious. "They asked about a girl," he said they were helping. Her heart dropped. "I told them I hadn't seen anyone," he continued. "They didn't like that." She swallowed hard. "I'm sorry." He looked at her steadily. "Don't be." That night, Daniel locked the doors earlier. He checked the land again before dark. The girl sat quietly, listening to the wind and distant sounds. As the stars filled the sky, she realized something important. This man barely knew her. He had no reason to get involved. And yet, he was choosing to stand in the path of something dangerous. Outside, far off, an engine idled briefly before going silent. Daniel looked toward the sound, his jaw tight. Trouble had not left. It had only paused. The next morning began with a strange stillness. The air felt heavier, as if the land itself was holding its breath. The girl woke early, sitting up on the couch before the sun fully rose. For a moment she listened. No engines, no voices, just the soft sound of wind moving across dry ground. Daniel was already awake. She could hear him outside, his boots slow and steady on the porch. When she stepped into the kitchen, he was pouring coffee, his eyes alert. "Did you sleep?" he asked. "A little," she answered honestly. "That's enough for now," he said. They ate quietly. The calm felt false, like the silence before a storm. Daniel checked his phone once, then slipped it into his pocket. He did not explain, but the girl sensed he was waiting for something. By mid-morning, the sun climbed higher and the heat returned. Daniel asked her to stay inside while he worked near the barn. She agreed, though staying still made her thoughts louder. She paced the small house, stopping often to look out the windows. Around noon, dust appeared again on the far road. This time, more than one vehicle came. Her heart began to race. She moved away from the window, pressing herself against the wall. The sound of engines grew louder, then stopped. Doors opened and closed. Voices carried across the land, calm but firm. Daniel stepped away from the barn and walked toward them. She watched from behind a curtain. 3 men stood near the gate. They looked confident, like men used to getting answers. One held a folder. Another rested his hands on his belt. Their smiles did not reach their eyes. Daniel did not invite them in. She could not hear the full conversation, but she saw their body language change. One man gestured toward the house. Daniel shook his head. Another man stepped closer. Daniel did not move back. Time stretched painfully. Finally, the man with the folder spoke longer than the others. Daniel listened, his face unreadable. When he replied, he spoke slowly, clearly. The man frowned. The girl's hands trembled. She felt small, trapped between walls that suddenly seemed too thin. After several minutes, one of the men laughed softly, as if trying to lighten the moment. Daniel did not laugh back. The men turned and walked away, but they did not leave the land. Instead, they moved closer to the fence line, spreading out slightly as if searching. Daniel returned to the house, closing the door behind him. "They're not giving up," he said quietly. Her voice shook. "What do they want from you?" "They want me to help them," he said. "And they don't like my answer." She lowered her head. "I never meant for this." Daniel lifted his hand gently. "Listen to me. What you did was survive. There's no blame in that." He looked toward the window. "But we need to be smart." The afternoon passed slowly. The men remained nearby, visible at times, disappearing behind structures or along the fence. Daniel kept the doors locked. He moved calmly, but the tension in his shoulders was clear. As evening approached, one of the men returned alone. He knocked on the door. Daniel opened it just enough to stand in the doorway. "I just want to talk," the man said, his tone friendly. "No trouble," Daniel's voice was steady. "We've talked." The man glanced past him into the house. "You sure about that?" Daniel did not move aside. "You're on private land, you've been told." The man's smile faded. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." Daniel met his eyes. "So are you." The man stood there a moment longer, then stepped back. "This isn't over," he said quietly. Daniel closed the door. That night the girl could not sleep at all. Every sound made her flinch. The wind against the walls sounded like footsteps. The creak of the house felt too loud. Daniel stayed awake again, sitting at the table. At one point she joined him, wrapping the blanket around herself. "Why are they so sure I'm here?" she asked. Daniel hesitated. "Because they don't believe in coincidence. And because they're used to being right." She stared at her hands. "I should have kept running." "Running forever isn't living," he replied. Just before dawn, headlights flashed briefly near the far fence, then disappeared. Daniel stood, his jaw tightening. "They're testing," he said. Morning brought no relief. The men returned, this time with another person. The girl recognized him instantly. Her breath caught in her throat. It was one of the men from the road. She shrank back, her whole body tense. Daniel noticed at once. "That's him," she whispered. Daniel stepped outside before they could approach the house. He positioned himself firmly between them and the door. The new man spoke first. His voice was calm, almost polite. "We need to speak with the girl." Daniel did not answer. She's important to us, the man continued, for everyone's good. Daniel shook his head. You need to leave. The man's eyes hardened. You don't understand the situation. Daniel's voice remained even. I understand enough. The men exchanged looks. The leader stepped closer, lowering his voice. You're risking a lot for someone you don't know. Daniel leaned slightly forward. I know enough. The girl watched, her heart pounding so hard she felt dizzy. She expected shouting, anger, something explosive. Instead, the man smiled thinly. We'll wait, he said. She can't hide forever. They left again, but this time they stayed close, too close. Daniel came inside and closed the door with care. They know, he said, and they're getting impatient. She felt fear rise like a wave. What happens now? Daniel took a slow breath. Now we stop being alone. He made another call, this one longer. He spoke in clear, careful words. When he finished, he looked at her. Help is coming, he said, but until then we hold steady. The hours crawled. The men remained visible, their presence heavy and threatening. The girl felt trapped like an animal surrounded. As the sun began to set, one of the vehicles moved closer again. A door slammed. Footsteps approached. Daniel stepped onto the porch. The leader spoke sharply this time. Last chance. Daniel stood firm, his body blocking the doorway completely. Behind him, the girl realized something with painful clarity. This man was no longer just helping her hide. He was standing between her and everything that wanted to take her life away, and the men outside knew it. The night that followed felt longer than any before it. The sky was clear, full of stars, but there was no comfort in their light. The girl sat near the back room, wrapped in the blanket, listening to every sound. The men outside did not leave. Their vehicles stayed parked at a distance, just far enough to feel like a warning. Daniel did not sleep. He moved quietly through the house, checking doors, windows, and the land beyond. He kept the lights low. He did not want to draw attention, but he also did not want the house to feel empty. At times, he stood by the window, watching the dark shapes beyond the fence. The girl finally spoke. Why won't they just go? Daniel answered without turning. Because they think waiting will break us. She hugged the blanket tighter. What if they're right? He turned then and looked at her carefully. Fear only wins when we let it decide for us. The words stayed with her even though fear still sat heavy in her chest. Hours passed. The wind picked up, brushing against the house like restless fingers. Once far off, she heard laughter. It sent a cold feeling through her. These men were not rushing. They were confident. They believed time was on their side. Just before dawn, Daniel's phone vibrated softly. He stepped into the kitchen to answer it. She watched his face as he listened. When he ended the call, his shoulders eased slightly. They're on their way, he said. Not far now. She did not ask who, she already knew. Morning came slowly. The men outside grew more active. One walked the fence line. Another leaned against a vehicle, watching the house openly now. They were no longer pretending. Daniel made breakfast, though neither of them ate much. He kept his movements calm, steady, like any normal morning. The girl admired that more than she could say. His calm made the house feel stronger, as if it were standing with them. By mid-morning, a vehicle approached from the opposite direction. It did not belong to the men who had been waiting. It drove straight through the gate without stopping. The girl held her breath. Two people stepped out. One wore plain clothes but carried himself with authority. The other stayed near the vehicle, watching everything closely. Daniel stepped outside to meet them. The men who had been waiting moved closer, their confidence shifting into irritation. Voices rose, sharp and demanding. The air felt tight, like a rope pulled too far. The girl watched through the window, her hands shaking. She could not hear every word, but she saw enough. Daniel spoke calmly, pointing toward the fence, then toward the road. The new arrivals listened carefully. One of the waiting men tried to interrupt. He was stopped with a raised hand. For the first time since this began, the balance changed. More vehicles arrived soon after, not many but enough. The waiting men grew quiet. Their body language shifted. They no longer spread out. They stayed close together. Daniel came back inside briefly. "Stay here," he told her. "No matter what," she nodded. Outside, discussions continued. Papers were shown. Phones were used. The girl could see faces tighten, then harden. One of the men argued loudly, his voice filled with anger. Another tried to calm him down. Finally, the men were told to leave. They did not go easily. One turned and looked directly at the house. His eyes were cold, filled with promise. The girl stepped back from the window, her heart pounding. When they drove away, the land felt suddenly wide and empty again. The silence that followed was heavy but different. It was no longer threatening. It felt like something had passed. Daniel returned inside and closed the door. He leaned against it for a moment, letting out a long breath. "It's not finished," he said. "But it's moving in the right direction." The girl sank onto the couch, her strength finally leaving her. Tears filled her eyes, not from fear this time, but from release. She had been holding herself together for too long. Later that day, she spoke more. She told her story fully now, from the moment she saw the men on the road to the night she ran. She spoke of her aunt, of the warning, of the fear that never left her chest. Daniel listened without interrupting. When she finished, he nodded slowly. "You did the right thing," he said. "Truth has a way of demanding daylight." That evening, someone else arrived. This time, the girl felt relief instead of fear. The conversation was quiet, respectful. Plans were made carefully. She would not be moved without protection. She would not disappear again. As the sun set, the girl stepped onto the porch. The land stretched out before her, calm and still. It looked the same as it always had, yet she felt different standing there. Daniel joined her. "I don't know how to thank you," she said. He shook his head. "You don't owe me anything." She looked at him, really looked at him, and understood something important. He had not acted because he was brave or strong. He had acted because he believed some lines should never be crossed. That night she slept deeply for the first time in days. Outside, the desert kept its silence, and for now, that silence meant safety. The morning after the long night felt different. The air was lighter and the land seemed to breathe again. The girl woke up without fear gripping her chest for the first time in days. Sunlight came through the window, warm and calm. For a few quiet seconds, she forgot everything that had happened. Then memory returned, but it no longer felt like it was crushing her. Daniel was outside, already working. She could hear the slow rhythm of his steps and the familiar sounds of the ranch waking up. Life was moving forward again, even if everything had not yet been solved. When she stepped onto the porch, Daniel looked up and nodded. "Morning," he said. "Morning," she replied. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the open land. No strange vehicles, no watching eyes, just wind and sky. Later that day, people returned. Not in a rush, not with loud voices, but with calm purpose. They spoke carefully and listened closely. The girl told her story again, slowly and clearly. This time she was not shaking. Each word felt like a small weight lifted from her shoulders. No one hurried her. No one doubted her. When she finished, there was a quiet moment. Then one of them spoke gently. "You're safe now," he said, "and you won't be alone anymore." Those words stayed with her. Plans were made, careful ones. She would leave the ranch soon, but not in fear and not without support. There were people who would stand beside her just as Daniel had. There were places where she could rest and begin again. That evening, she walked the fence line one last time. This was where she had collapsed, where hope had almost slipped away. She stood there now, steady on her feet, feeling stronger than she had before. Daniel joined her, stopping a few steps away. "I don't know what comes next," she said. "That's all right," he answered. "Most people don't." She looked at the land, then back at him. "You changed everything for me." He shook his head slowly. "You changed it yourself, I just didn't turn away." The next morning, she left the ranch. There was no rush, no fear pushing her forward. Daniel watched from the porch as the vehicle moved down the road and disappeared into the distance. The ranch felt quieter after that. Days passed, then weeks. Life returned to its steady rhythm. Daniel worked the land, fixed fences, and cared for animals. But he noticed small changes in himself. He listened more closely to the world around him. He paid attention to things he once ignored. Sometimes, at night, he thought about the girl. He wondered how she was doing, if she was sleeping well, if she was beginning to smile again. He hoped she knew she had done something powerful simply by surviving and speaking. One afternoon, a letter arrived. It was short, written carefully. She thanked him not with big words but honest ones. She said she was safe. She said she was learning how to live without fear guiding every step. She said she would never forget the man who stood in front of danger when he did not have to. Daniel folded the letter and placed it in a drawer. He did not see himself as a hero. He never had. He was just a man who believed that some choices mattered more than comfort. Far away, the girl stood on new ground, looking toward a future that no longer felt closed. The past would always be part of her, but it no longer controlled her. The desert still held its secrets. But this one had been brought into the light.